Hey everybody, we're live. Welcome to Watching Code Office Hours. This is the 48th week we've been doing it. So thanks for joining. It's the place to get your questions answered about watching code stuff. So it's an hour for you to, in case you have any problems or questions about the watching code content. So as usual, join the Facebook group to get info about upcoming events in case we have a schedule change, that sort of thing. The call-in link, if you want to call in, that's the best way to ask the question, to call in. If you're watching on YouTube, click in the event description, you'll see a link to this document. And from there, you can find the call-in link and you can call in and ask your question. Student of the week was Gustav. Gustav had a really cool contribution to one of the open source libraries that we go through in the members section, Accounting.js, and he fixed one of the problems I actually mentioned in one of our videos. So that was cool. And the maintainer of the project actually responded pretty quickly and was going to take a look at it. So that was really cool to see. And I always encourage people to do more open source stuff. So I try to highlight contributions like this because I know it can be scary to add code to a stranger's project and then have them scrutinize your code and ask questions and ask why do you do this or that. And so it's not easy. So I just wanted to highlight this and give Gustav some props on that. So that's your student of the week. The public service announcement. So I got a couple. I've had a lot of questions about this over the past year, which is like how long does how long does practical JavaScript take? How long does watching code premium take? And so I made a video to answer that question. So if you're wondering about that, you can find out. So check that out. And new stuff this week. There's a new video for members. There's Accounting.js part 14. And this one it goes through probably the most important function in the Accounting.js library, format money. And though there weren't, I think, any new concepts. There are some complicated portions that we had to kind of decode, but there weren't any really new concepts. So instead, I focused a lot of my time on kind of critiquing the style, the clarity, making sure the code is as easy to understand as possible, and also kind of mentioning some of the API design choices and what I thought and mostly what I disliked about them. So that was Accounting.js part 14. And the next video is going to be all about recursion. At first, I wanted to, so format money uses recursion inside of it, but it ended up being quite hard to lump that topic into this video. So I decided I'll make it in a separate video and then really thoroughly teach recursion with some small examples and then build up so that we can not get overwhelmed by the example inside of format money. So that's the plan for the next video. And this is the new stuff that came out this week. So that's it. That's all I have. And from here, let's go to open questions. So as usual, I'm going to try to start and call people in the order that they called in. I'm not going to be perfect on that. So Ben, I know you don't have a question, but let us know if you do. And then after that, it was Adam.
No, I didn't have any questions in particular.
Okay, cool. If that changes, just let me know, and I'll
Will do.
come back to you. Next was Elliot.
Cool. Can you hear me okay, Gordon?
Yes.
Something wrong.
Elliot?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, it's okay. It's not great.
Okay, come back to me.
Okay, or
Thank you. Sorry.
you could try asking it right now and just see. Do you have a question?
It's more to do with the apply function, and I know that you get asked this question quite a bit. I just wanted you to kind of go over that. It was in relation to actually that Beast challenge, the very first one.
All right.
I was just trying to understand how that works. Yeah.
Sure. So let me find yours. I think you had you had a solution up there. So it was with improving Reynolds debugger, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, let's check it out. And you're at the bottom. Okay, so I'm just gonna kind of paraphrase what the point of this was so that people listening are not totally confused. But what we wanted to do is we wanted to have a function called run with debugger. And what it would do is it would take a function as a callback. So it'd take a callback function and run that callback function with an array of arguments. And it would run this callback function with the array of arguments passed into this callback function, and it would also trigger the debugger. So that was the point of it. And Elliot has a solution that's really close, but not quite there. So Elliot, I'll more or less adapt what you have, since that'll be. So in the function, what we want to do first is we want to run the debugger on it. So that's what you have in line 6. So that's perfect. And then you have check that optional value is an array and it's not empty. Let's just, to simplify this, let's just ignore that. And let's just assume that people are going to use it correctly, because your question is really about line 13, not line 9 through 11. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's great.
So, and then what you have here is you have callback, and then you have bind, and you have optional value. And
yes, yeah.
You have, then you run the function, right?
Yep, yeah, that's correct.
So let's see what happens here. So let's do run with debugger, and let's pass in, I think your example was say name. Let's keep it simple, and I'll just define a function right in line. So it'll take 1 argument, and it'll just console log name. And then as the second argument, it'll take an array of arguments, and let's say Elliot.
Yeah.
And let's just run it through and see what happens. So we got a reference error. Optional value is not defined. Okay, it's because I didn't rename I called it something else. Instead of optional value, I called it array of arguments. So
yeah,
let me fix that. Let's make this the same. And then let's try to run the code again. And we don't get what we want, right?
No.
So nice. So let's just let the function run. It runs debugger for us. So let's go into the debugger and see what's happening. So what we have here is we have callback bind, and then
yeah,
we're gonna go into this function because we're calling this function. And when you go into that function, you see that name is not getting passed in.
Yeah, okay.
So that's the problem. Now,
that's kind of where I got to.
Yeah. So the problem is that, remember how bind works? Bind will, the first argument to bind is this value you want to set. But we don't really care about this, right?
No.
No, we don't. So you could say, you could just pass along this, the default this, whatever it is, or you could also just say null. It doesn't really matter, but this will get you closer, because at least now we're not passing in the array of arguments for this. We're actually trying to pass the arguments into the bind function. At this stage, Elliot, I don't really remember what bind does, so I have to look it up. So the second argument is arguments to prepend to the bound function when invoking the target function. So in documentation, these brackets are they mean optional. They don't mean array.
Yeah.
So that might be confusing. So you can have any number of arguments passed in after the this argument, and
okay, that makes more sense.
yes. So this is where bind is not the best option.
Yeah.
This is where apply comes in. So apply actually does exactly what we want. So we want it to pass an arguments array, and this is what it does. And you can just ignore the this arg if you want. And then the additional thing that's nice is you had the extra parentheses right here, which is very easy to miss. If someone's reading, this is not the best code because I think most people, when they read this line, they'll see this, and then they will just miss this part.
Yes.
Because it's just easy to miss.
Yes.
And so apply is better because it will also run the function for you. So it actually calls the function.
I think that explains it really well. I was confused. Now that you've explained the passing in the default this value and the optional arguments, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. And so it might be worth it to look at the test-driven development series again. Well, so now it works as intended. Because I think in the test-driven development series, we used a lot of bind, so you get comfortable with that, and you'll see that's a little bit different than how you tried to use it. And then I think in the simple test series, we used apply. So that might be a good way to go back and look at how we used these in the past.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, cool. Any other questions, Elliot?
Cool. No, that's good. Sorry about the internet. Yeah, I'll try and get it fixed.
No worries. You should go back and update your solution.
Yeah, I will. Thank you.
Okay, cool. All right, thanks for the question, Elliot. Okay, so next we have, let's go with, I don't know who's that. Wait, so Adam, you didn't have a question. Ben didn't have a question, Elliot. So Adrian's next. Adrian, you there? Adrian. All right, Adrian, we're gonna come back to you. Oh, 1 sec. Okay, I'll come back to you. Let's go to, I think, Nate, do you have any questions? Oh, we can't hear you.
I thought I had a question and then I figured out the answer.
Oh, what was it? I'm just curious.
Kind of, it has to do with the book club a little bit, but maybe everyone could learn about it. Just the black boxing. Oh,
okay, black boxing scripts.
Yeah, I was a little confused about it, and then a cursory Google search solved that problem for me.
Yeah. So just to mention to everyone, this is probably not gonna make any sense to you, and if it doesn't, that's fine. Just ignore it. But if you have gotten to the case where, like for example, you're running through the debugger and then you go through jQuery, and then you're like in the jQuery source code and it's a mess and you don't want to be there, you can tell the debugger not to go into jQuery, and so that when you run the debugger and step into functions, you only go through your own code. And so that's what Nate's talking about. And yeah, a cursory Google search will probably explain it better than me, I think. Cool. Okay. Well, thanks for coming, Nate. Next, Adrian, are you ready now? Adrian? All right, Adrian, you lost your chance a second time. Try, Hangouts is known to have problems, so try exiting, I don't know, maybe try a different browser. And make sure the settings in Hangouts is picking up the right mic that you have in case you have different microphones. So next we'll go to Taranjit.
Hey,
Taranjit?
Gordon.
Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, good, thanks. No questions for me this time.
Okay. How where are you at with the material?
I've started the simple testing, I think it was called.
Mhm.
I finished looking through the jQuery to do MVC.
Mhm.
I just started the simple test stuff.
Cool. How was the test-driven development series?
I'm just at the beginning. I've only watched the first video, so not much.
Oh wait, I
much
thought you
info.
said you were doing simple test. Simple
Oh,
test is
maybe-
after test-driven development.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, maybe the one before. Yeah.
Mm.
Yep.
Okay. Cool. Awesome. Well, good work on doing the jQuery stuff. That's
Sweet,
great.
Thanks.
All right. It looks like Adrian got it working now. So let's flip back. Adrian, you there? Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Are you on a phone?
Well, I was on a computer. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, like I was on a computer, but I cannot figure this thing out for the life of me. So my question is about the version 11 of practical JavaScript.
Okay.
So the for each things, the for each loops, or if they're called loops. So I don't understand. This is the second video, like under requirements, and it's like at 3:15. So you're redoing the
Did it destroy all for loops?
yeah, and it's the like if everything's true, make everything false, or get number of completed to dos, one of those. But I don't understand when you do this dot to dos.
But hold on.
dot
Let
for
me try to
each.
pull up the code. So this is version 11, right?
Yep.
Okay. Let me pull up the code so then you can just point at it instead of describing it in words, which is very hard to follow.
It's true.
Even if you wrote the code, it's still hard to follow. Oh, it's in hyperdev. Oh man. Okay, I have to figure out. One second. So
Do you
I'm
want me to
trying
share my screen?
Sure, yes, that'll make it easier.
Let me see if I can do it.
Are you on a computer now?
All right.
Yeah, perfect. This is good. Adrian? Yes. It seems like you're good.
Yeah, this thing doesn't have any, I can't hear anything. So in case you can hear this, the question I have is right here.
Okay, what about it? So the project is Gem Eater. Okay, let me pull it up. Hyperdev. Adrian, you can't hear me at all?
Gotcha now.
Gotcha now.
So,
Yeah, so on the computer I can't hear you, but on my phone I can.
Okay. Let me pull up the project.
So it says on the screen sharing.
Gordon, I just put it in the chat if you need it.
Oh, perfect. Awesome. Yeah, I haven't had that question in a while, so I haven't had a practical JavaScript question in a while, so didn't have that handy. Thanks, Ben. Okay, so Adrian, I'll share my screen and then you can talk to me from your phone and okay.
Sure.
So let me open this up. Okay, thanks again, Ben. So I have version 11 put up. It was, where is it? It was right here, right? Around line 78.
Yep.
Okay, so what's the question?
So I just don't understand where you get the to do. So after the function, then it's just the to, I think it's a variable. I don't understand where that comes from.
Okay. This actually has a very concise answer. You should go watch this video. So the way for each gets access to each item in the array is the same way that the for each we write in this section does it. So in the interlude on functions inside of functions, we end up writing a for each that works just like the native for each, right? So here's the native for each, and it gets access to each element in an array. So in this case, there's a students array. And then the log name function logs each student in the students array. And there must be a point at which, okay, so now here we write the function. Do you see that?
Yeah, it's a little hard on the phone, but yeah, I get the idea.
Yeah, so you should go rewatch this.
So, but is to do that, is that part of, are you calling something like within the script, or here's just like
I can't understand what you're saying, but you should definitely rewatch this. I think it'll explain your question because it goes through an example where we completely use the for each we've written, and it also shows examples where we call for each on an existing array, like right here. So I think if you go through that thoroughly, you should probably rewatch this whole thing, functions instead of functions, and then send a message in the questions channel in Slack if you're still unsure. Or go watch this now, and if it still makes, if you just go watch it right now and then come back and see if it makes sense to you. If not, you can ask us in like 20 minutes or whatever after you watch this video. And it's only 7 minutes. So take 10 minutes and watch this, think about it, and come back. And get your try to get your computer to work too if you come back. Is that good? Okay, I'll take that as a yes. So you have an assignment. Come back with results. Okay. So thanks, Adrian. Next we got Heggy. Are you there? Am I saying your name? How do you say your name? Is it Heggy?
Hi. Yeah, it's Heggy.
Heggy. Okay, cool. Do you have any questions?
Yes, I do. I actually have my code on the CodeShare.
How many screens do you have?
I have like one here and one here and one here.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, like I heard it, like I'm doing the like away from bootcamp thing. So like I just invested on some screens. So I have like, because they're big on pair programming there. So, but I know that you're not like, whatever.
Let's go into the questions.
Yes. So here's the CodeShare that I have.
What is CodeShare?
So if you just click on it, you can see the code that I have question on.
Okay.
So it was I'm on line 1, and it's before, I think it was display to do. And this is the part where you decided that we're gonna bring some of these things outside of for loop. And my question is, okay, so I was like, okay, well, if you're gonna bring out one variable outside of for loop, which is line 20, you took that out. I said, okay, yeah, you don't need to create like loop for UL every time. So then my question was like, okay, well, there's 26, there's another variable, and you're creating element li like line all the time.
Yeah.
So you don't have to do that 5 times. So I thought, well, why don't I take it out? And I tried it out, and
It didn't work.
it didn't work. And however, my thought process was this: you're referring like line 26, you're referring to do li, and you see there's to do li in here. So you're actually referring it 5 times. I would think that it's going to get created 5 times because you're referring it in there. So do you understand where I'm coming from here?
So what happens is inside of this for loop, you create a new to do li, however many times. So if you have 5 elements in your to-do list, then this will loop through 5 times, and it'll create to do li 5 times, and it'll add each of those 5 to do li's to the to-dos unordered list. And you want to create 5 of them because each to do li represents a different to do object, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is
Okay.
this? What is to?
I don't know. Maybe I didn't type that correctly.
Oh, so I'd imagine it's so there are a couple problems with this. It should be I is less than to do's length, and then
I plus plus.
I
maybe.
plus plus.
Mhm.
Yeah, is that right? I sometimes
You're correct.
forget. Okay.
I must have copied that one.
Yeah, but I mean the key difference is that to do's ul there's only one, right? This is the element where you insert all of the to do list items. You insert all of them into this one element. And
But do you see that how to do is like line 27? You see there's to do in here, to do li. So you're actually referring to it 5 times because so what I'm thinking is this. I was like, okay, why don't I just move this out and bring it out here? Because that's a variable. I don't want to create new variable 5 times.
So what's happening here is you create only one to do li ever, right? And then you try to append the same to do li over and over again. So if you have 5 items in your to-do list, this will it'll try to add the same one 5 times. But the way the DOM works is if you try to add the same one again, it just won't do anything because it's like I already did that.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It's not creating li 5 times.
No. It's attempting to add the same one.
But it's saying create element on line 24.
But this is only running once, right? If you only run create element,
so you're like, okay, let's go look up to do li, and then it goes inside there and document create. It's like, okay, I'm going to create it 5 times.
No, so that's not how it works. So
okay,
what you have right here is you have creates one single li element. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then here you have, let's say, pretends to do list.length is equal to 5. It seems like because you mentioned that a few times. So if to do list length is 5, then line below will attempt to append the same li to ul 5 times. But the problem is if the li is already in the ul, nothing will happen. So what's happening is the first time, this will run 5 times. The first time it will attempt to append li to the unordered list, and it will succeed, right? Because it didn't exist there before. However, the second time the li is already in the ul, So it just doesn't do anything. Now, if you want to, so this is a problem, right? So what you want to do instead is you want to create a different li. You want to create a different li each time in the for loop. So then append child has something new to append to to-dos ul.
Okay, I got it.
Okay. Any other questions?
I do have like one question, which kind of makes me go slow in the practical JavaScript. I feel like after watching it, I kind of want to do it all by myself. Is that a right approach? And then, I mean, I noticed there's one girl who did that her by herself, and then that was good thing. You commented that was good thing, but I feel like, and then there was another video about don't try to create things from the scratch. So I was like, okay, so just tell me, is it okay to just?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good question. There's value in trying to rebuild it from scratch, but for most students, it's too hard. So I wouldn't expect most students to be able to do that. So instead, what I think is a better challenge is, so you're on, which version are you on?
I'm actually doing,
like what?
you have moved to the gomix.com now. So it was maybe 10, I'm not sure.
Okay, so let's just pretend that you're in version 10. So if you're at version 10 and this stuff is still new to you, right? So like, for example, from this question, it's still not like, there's still new things you're learning, right? And so I wouldn't expect you to be able to build everything from nothing until version 10. I think that's not a reasonable expectation. But you could have the code from the end of version 9, right? It completed at the end of version 9, and then see, hey, can I just do this single requirement? Right? And then you could practice that. And that's more reasonable. And if you want a way, like if you feel like you want to review it more, I think that's a more reasonable exercise. But I mean, that's already, I think, really good if you can do that and do each of these requirements individually, right? So you know, if you get stuck, you can just go back and look at the video, and then it'll sink in a little bit more. But that is a much more digestible task than being able to be like, oh, I have a blank file and I'm going to get from 0 to version 10. Like, I don't think, I think there are students that do that for sure. But I think a lot of them have done the course a bunch of times and reviewed a lot before doing that. And they tend to have, not all of them, but they tend to already have had programming experience. So don't feel like, that someone did it and I have to do it. I don't think that's true, because everyone is coming from a different point, right? But I think, again, when I doing each requirement one by one and looking at each one at a small one at a time is a valuable thing to do. And it's a very small task, right? And I would encourage you to, version 10 is maybe not the best place to start. I would start back earlier and see, start with version 1, start with version 2, start with version 3, and see, can you do this single, 4-minute thing? Can you do right here? Can you do the work in this 3-minute 11-second video, right? Those are, you want to break it down into small, meaningful chunks that are attainable, right? You don't want to have exercises that are so big and so overwhelming that you don't know where to start. That's where it's not a good thing. So I guess generally what I'd say is start smaller than you think you can accomplish. It's better to err on the side of being conservative versus being overambitious, and then you get overwhelmed and don't progress. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Any other questions?
No.
Okay, cool. So the next, I think, Anthony. Anthony, you there?
I'm here, but I actually don't have any questions right now. I'm just listening in.
Okay. Do you have any, where are you at with the content?
I'd finished the previous video, so what you just put up last night. I haven't done that yet.
Okay, cool. You should do some of the problems in the beasts for the beast channel.
Yeah, I just got home not too long ago, so tonight I'm gonna get through your video and then probably stay up doing at least the first one. So I'm looking
Perfect.
forward to those. Nice.
Perfect. Awesome. Keep it up. Okay. So it looks like everyone's questions have been answered. Adrian, did you do the homework I assigned? Adrian? Okay. Well, it looks like we've answered all the questions. We're short. We still have a little bit of time left. So what I'll do is I will teach a short little lesson to reward everyone that stayed a little bit later on recursion. And I'm doing this because I need to teach it soon. This is the next topic. So it's good practice for me. So if you don't know what recursion is, you will know in a few minutes. Well, first of all, does anyone already know what it is? I know like Nate does, and I know Ben, you probably do. Am I right? Is that a right assumption?
Kinda.
Kind of. Okay.
I've done it. I don't really understand it very well, so.
Nate, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, when I was going through Eloquent JavaScript, I couldn't understand it really, but then when we used it for some of the beast challenges, it made a bit more sense. And then
Okay.
I remember earlier I was looking at Accounting.js part 14, and it made more sense to me as well.
Okay. Cool. So looks like everyone will learn something then. And I'm hoping that this is simple enough for if you don't know any recursion, you can follow it. But complicated enough and detailed enough where if you're like Ben and Nate, you've seen it, but you're not super comfortable with it, you'll still learn something. So that's the intent. Let me share my screen and I'll start with an example. So this is an example I'm thinking about using in the next video for members, Accounting.js 15. I don't know if this is the one I'm going to stick with. Maybe it'll depend on how this goes. But let me explain this scenario. I'll pop this out so I get more room. That should be more room for us. Okay, so recursion. It's sometimes clear console history. It's sometimes a confusing topic, but if you get around the vocabulary, I think a lot of times what makes things hard is the vocabulary. That sounds intimidating, but the definition is not. It's quite simple. It's a function that calls itself, and that's it. That's what it means. And I think of a simple example. So let me start with a function, and I don't have a good name, so I'll call it recursive function. And it won't take any arguments right now. But let's just say it's going to call itself. And I'll say the general problem with a recursive function is you can get into what's called infinite loop and just destroy your computer's memory. It will just run out of memory and freeze. And so this can happen if you have, you call this function. I'm not going to type this. I actually don't know what happens if you do this, but I don't think the results will be good. But imagine if you had that function and then you ran the function. So you'd have this crazy thing where you would call the function and then it calls itself, and then it goes into the function, it calls itself, and then it calls itself, and then it calls itself like forever. And that's not a good scenario. So, but we do have recursion here, a function that calls itself, but we have a kind of broken example because it never ends. So that's a problem. So what we'll say is, let's have at least do something. So let's say I'm recursing. And that throws people off. So the problem with a lot of recursive functions is they can continue on forever. So that's an issue, right? And if you have something like this, that's going to happen. So to avoid that, you can, have a for loop. So let's say for var I is equal to 0, I is less than, let's recurse 4 times, and then I++. And so this function will call itself only 4 times. So I have a typo or don't understand what I'm doing. So I don't understand what I'm doing. So I'm going to cancel this. Stop. Oh, I just killed the thread. Okay, so there you have infinite loop. I just had to wait for the browser to kill itself. So hold on one second. All right, that was a really bad example because I had a typo and the function did not end ever. So let me stick with the original example I have. I think it'll be simpler. So the original function I had was, it was unwrap. And the scenario is like this. You have some data and it's wrapped in a bunch of arrays. So in this case, it's wrapped in, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 arrays. And in the middle, you have a value you want to get a hold of, something like that. And what you want is you want a function that can take in a value like this and then unwrap all the layers into the thing inside, no matter how many layers there are. And so let's just call it thing. It gets a thing. And what it does is, let me think. Let's say each time you want to go 1 layer in. So each thing is an array. So 1 layer in is just the first element. So if you're looking at this, for example, the next layer inside is just the first element in this array. And you want to do that a bunch of times, but you don't know how many times you want to do it. And so let's say you have a recursive case. And you basically want to unwrap the arrays or unwrap the array. But then if you're in the middle, if you're actually in the middle and you have the value 1, you can just log the value. And the way you can check is you can see if array, so arrays have a method isArray. And that checks to see if something is an array or not. So if something is an array, we know that we want to unwrap it. So that's why we're doing this check. If it's not an array, we know we're in the middle and we can just log the value. So console log thing. And so here's our function. Now, this function is not great because it only unwraps one layer. But if you call the function on itself, you can then have it successively always look into the first elements of the array. So if you have the example like this, if you give it thing, this is thing, and then you look at the first element, it's this thing, and then you look at the first element, it's this thing, and then you look at the first element of that, it's this thing, and then you look at the first element of that, it's this thing, and then you look at the first element of that, it's number 1, and then you can skip this part and you'll look console log thing. Let's see if it works. I don't know. This is not very well thought out. Let's do a really simple case. 1, okay. No problem with that. This doesn't work. Unwrap. Can someone spot the bug? I think it's subtle. Look at this. Do you do Israel on the arc? Wait 1 second. Let me think of this. So we have
put thing in is array as a parameter.
wait, hold on. So we have unwrapped thing if array. Oh my gosh. I'm such an idiot. We need, yeah. Ben, I think you just said that, right? We need to put thing into here. All right. Dang, so bad, so bad. Okay. So I didn't actually check to see if thing was an array. So now let's go through the examples now. So if you don't have anything to unwrap, it'll work fine. If you want to unwrap 1 layer, it'll work fine now. And if you want to unwrap a lot of layers, let's say, I don't know how many this is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I'll do the same thing on this side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It'll still work. So this is kind of cool. And this is a pretty common use of arrays, of recursion. You want to, it's when you want to look at data no matter how deep the data is. So in this case, you have like, imagine like a box, like a box and a box and a box and a box, and you don't know how many boxes there are. This is the kind of logic you would use to tell someone if you gave them a gag gift of boxes and boxes. You'd basically say, hey, unwrap the box. If you unwrap the box and you get another box, unwrap it again. And just keep on doing that. Unless you don't find a box in it, then you get the thing, right? So that's the kind of thinking that's involved in this. You also see this thinking in the DOM itself. So in the DOM, you have like this hierarchical structure of like divs, and you can have like divs inside divs and stuff, and you don't know how many layers there are. So you could have a bunch of nesting, right? And in this case, you often see recursive algorithms come up again because there's this similar scenario where you don't know how many layers deep you need to go. And so that's another scenario where this logic becomes very helpful. Again, the logic is if you go 1 layer deep and you still need to go further, then just keep going. Otherwise, I don't know, log the value or save the data or whatever. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. So if you were to have a array at index 1, like in the same array where your one value is, then it wouldn't go any further than that one value, even though you still have like an array side by side because you're just checking index 0, right?
I'm not sure what you mean, but in this case, this function is not very robust. It only works if you have a value right in the middle of a bunch of arrays. So there's never an element at the second index. So I wouldn't expect this function to work in the case you're mentioning. Anthony, does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, what I was wondering is like, if you were to put a secondary value in like an array side by side in, maybe
I think it would just ignore it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, even if you were to put like say thing index 1, and it would bypass the one value because you're checking index that's not that.
I think
You know
that's
what I'm
not the spirit of
Yeah.
this example.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah. But as long as you understand this example, I think you're fine. Ben, you had a question. Let's move to Ben.
Yeah, so for my is prototype of that abuse challenge, I found out what was wrong with it because I was looking at Kenny's code because his and mine are really similar. But basically, I was using recursion to do this, and when I called the function again, I wasn't using return, and it was doing this crazy. I can show you if you want.
Okay.
Basically, how do I screenshot this? Okay.
I can pull up your code too.
Oh yeah.
I have it up right here.
Yeah. So like see how I have in line 23 the return there. When I don't have that and I ran it through the debugger, it was like going fine, basically fine, and then it was working. It was hopping into there, and returning true in line 18 that if statement. And the next step, it would hop out, and then the next step, it would go to line 26, return false, if I don't have that return statement in line 23. Does that make sense?
No, I can't. From looking at this, I can't. I'd have to probably play around with it.
Okay.
Wait, so hold on. So if it's undefined, return false. Okay. If it's a string,
That's just for primitive values.
but this is not. I don't think this is what you want, right? Because if you get, oh, I guess not. I guess you're right. Yeah, I guess you're right. So is that how the native one behaves?
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
does? Okay.
actually, that was a whole thing I did with another student.
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, these things aren't obvious to me either. I don't know. I really don't know. These are really edge cases. So it's really good that you researched that. And then prototype of object equals get prototype of objects. If prototype object equals dude, the names are really, it's too similar. Right? Prototype of object. Oh, prototype object is this. Okay.
Yeah.
If it's equal, it's if if prototype object is equal to prototype of objects.
Yeah, so like if they have the same proto there, it'll return true. If they don't, then it'll go to the next if statement, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the test for this that failed was I'm passing object.prototype as the first argument, and then any other thing that's constructed from it as the second argument.
I see. Yeah, I see. I want to find someone. I think someone had a really like tight solution. Let me see. Let me see if I can find it. There was one person that wrote it, and then I was like, I think I would just write it like that. Let's see. I feel like we're veering off track a lot. Yeah, I think. Yeah, maybe I would have used a while loop here. Yeah, I think I need I'd need a little more time to digest it, Ben.
Yeah, that's fine.
But what you can do that's really helpful. So one problem that people have is when they use recursion, it's really easy to have infinite loops, and then have a stack overflow. It's maybe I'll show you what we mean. But a way you can do that and like simulate going through the infinite loop is to throw in a debugger statement where you think your logic is broken, and then you can run through the debugger, and then you'll notice the call stacks, which I'll show you in a second, get bigger and bigger and bigger, and you know you have a bug. So that can be one thing that is that you can look out for. But I guess the thing I wanted to try to emphasize is that what you have here is you have a case where you actually use recursion and you continuously call the function again. And then you have a base case, which is the case where you stop calling the function over again. And so every recursive function has to have those two things. It has to call itself, otherwise it's not recursive, but it also has to have a case where it can stop, and because otherwise you go on forever and you crash your computer. So that is a quick introduction to recursion. And I think I did pretty poorly. So I have to think about how to do this better. But so that's what I'll be thinking about. Oh, I can show you how the call stack works. So with unwrap, I'll show you a really simple example. I'll do debugger on this first, so you can show that. So this is a case where we have a recursive function, but it doesn't actually use the recursive feature because it immediately goes to the base case, which is console log thing. So the thing is not an array, thing is 1. And so it's going to go directly to the else section and then log 1 to the console. So that's what you have right here. So that's not a great way to see recursion. If you add one layer, though, you can see the recursion happening, and you can see it in the call stack. So the call stack is probably something that's new to most of you. And so in this next video, I wanted to go like really in depth and explain how to navigate the call stack and make sense of this. But each time you run a function, you probably don't notice this. You probably haven't noticed this, but now that you know that this thing exists, you can play around with it, and it'll add a whole new layer to your understanding and a whole new perspective to looking at your code. But you can see the kind of context of every function. So when you're running a function or any code in the console, it gets kicked off by an anonymous function. The Chrome console actually has a function that runs the code that you type in the console. So there's this anonymous function that Chrome uses to call this code that you typed into the console. And then next you have another, so there's that anonymous function, and then it kicks off another function called line 2. And there you can see right here, the blue arrow. Now we're in the context of the unwrap function call. And this is the first function call to unwrap. Because unwrap is recursive, it will call itself again. And then you can see the second call to unwrap is added to the top of the call stack. And in this case, it's only going to happen, I think, twice, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so it'll happen twice because you only have one layer to unwrap. So it will recurse. So really, it will recurse one time. You have the initial call to unwrap, and then it will call itself once to unwrap that single layer of array, the single array layer, and then it will just console log thing. So you have two calls to unwrap. But you can easily have a bunch. So in the case where you have a super long, like many layers, say 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just the arrow, the brackets match up, so it's not that big of a deal. But if you have this many layers, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you should expect there to be 5 calls to unwrap in the call stack. So you can see that here. The first one, the second one, the third one, the fourth one, the fifth one, and then the final one will actually have the bare value of 1. So the call stack can be a really good way to kind of see the recursion happening. And I think this is how I was able to finally wrap my head around recursion. It's again using the debugger. And you'll notice that you have a bug in the in your recursive function if the call stack like keeps on growing and it never shrinks. In this case, it goes down, it like starts to shrink because once a function is done, its context on the call stack is thrown away. So in this final call to unwrap where it passes in 1 for thing, it's going to skip past the isArray section. It's going to console log thing. And then you can see that right here. It'll console log 1. And then since that function's done, watch the call stack. So right now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers. And then this was the initial call. Once we finish this function call, one like this part will be taken off the call stack. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4 layers. And then that same thing will happen with each successive call once you get to the very end in the base case. And then all the function calls will go away. And so that's an interesting way to look at recursion in a different way. And also just pay attention to the call stack in general, because you've probably like kind of ignored this, but now it'll start to make more sense, I think. Any comments? I feel like I really butchered that, but it'll get better. This is practice.
I'll definitely use the call stack more, especially with what we're doing. I think that'd be helpful.
I think, for example, your initial question about black boxing scripts is actually pretty important, because when you black box scripts, they actually get removed from the call stack too. Because like if you have a testing framework like Jasmine running, it like destroys your call stack. It's like all Jasmine stuff. And then you can't see like what your code is doing. And then you just have like all this third-party library code like jQuery, Jasmine, and I don't know, whatever. And then you can't see like the call stacks for your own functions. So black boxing can be really helpful. And then you can actually have like a usable call stack that can like give you information. So
cool. Yeah, it was that Lodash one. It was the same thing Evo was talking about, the for each Lodash.
Yep.
I was trying to look at the one, the digest that removes itself or whatever, or you know what I mean. The one that the watcher that removes itself, and I couldn't see it, so I black boxed the Lodash. But then I think I can see something with the call stack with that might help it too.
Cool. Ben, was any of this new to you?
No, I get the concept. It's just like hard to apply it in situations. Like I don't know where I would do it.
I see. Yeah, I think the main thing, the classic case is when you need to go to unknown depth. If that makes sense. So like a really classic case is when people say we want to traverse the debugger. I mean the DOM. So for example, like some JavaScript frameworks will allow you to put like little tags in HTML. So let me show you. So Angular has this feature, for example. Angular will allow you to have like, you know, your body elements, and inside of the body you might have like divs, but like some divs have Angular functionality. There might be like ng, I don't know, controller or something. And these Angular attributes could be anywhere in the DOM. And so Angular actually has to go look through every single element to find any attributes that match the Angular attribute names. And so to do that, it has to recurse through the DOM because it has no idea how many layers deep each of the elements are. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that totally. Yeah, it's very helpful.
So that's a very common case. Most front-end frameworks have some kind of feature like that. It's going to use some recursive, use recursion, because there's like the same problem. It's like unknown depth.
Right. Yeah.
The other case with the is prototype of is the same thing. You could have an incredibly long prototype chain of unknown depth. So, I guess that's not really a good example because you could have used a while loop too, but in this case you can't. And the reasons for that are a little bit subtle, but it's still similar.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, it's unknown depth. Yeah, that's helpful.
Yeah, I think that's the most common thing I see, and there are many other cases too, but they're far less common.
Yeah, usually when I've used it, it's just saw it on Stack Overflow. Someone else did it like that or something.
Yeah, and one thing that helps a lot too is looking through the call stacks can be confusing. So sometimes I'll just write it out on paper or like in comments. So for example, with the unwrap function, if you had an example like we had, let's say you had an example that had 3 layers. One way to visualize it is to think about it like this. This is the base call, right? This foundational call. And then the next call is going to call the same function, but with 1 less layer, right? And then the next call after that is going to call the same function, but with 1 less layer. And then the next function is going to call it itself with 1 less layer. And then, and so on. So, and then the next function is going to call itself. Oh wait, did I do that right? So 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1. Yeah. So then you can see, oh, okay. And then I'll finally log 1. And then all the function calls will stop to reach the end. Visualizing it is really helpful.
Okay. Gordon, I have a question then. Would it be like a good idea to use a switch statement if you want to target the way your like recursion goes down through that tree of arrays? So say you have like a bunch of divs, but maybe you can't really go in a linear way because one element has like 2 divs or something like that. You understand what I'm saying with your example from Angular? Maybe that ng controller tag is further down in parallel divs. Like, how would you target that? Would it be like a switch statement, if cases, or something?
Right.
Like
So
that?
no. So a for each would be really valuable. So here's I'll talk about the steps. So one thing that's helpful when writing recursive code is to think about if you had a robot that responded to English, like what would you tell it, right? So if you wanted to traverse a DOM, and DOM nodes have certain properties like you just stated, Anthony. It's not like the unwrapping function where we are just going to go down straight through a bunch of arrays. they're sibling nodes and stuff, right? And so what you need to do is you would say, look at each DOM element, keyword each, okay? Then if it has child, I guess look at each DOM element. If it has child elements, you look at each DOM element, and then you see what I mean? So you go through each DOM element, and if it doesn't have child elements, you just stop. If it does, you look at each of its child elements in the same way, right? So for each element, you ask, does it have child elements? No? Okay, stop. If yes, then keep going. And if you use like a for each, and you'll go through all of the elements at the same level.
And then after that, if you don't find what you're looking for, then you just go to the next higher index, right?
Well,
I say higher index.
Yeah,
like
I think you should hold off on this, right? Let me see.
I think I understand it though, because I was just thinking right now, if you put a for loop inside of your unwrap thing that you just made, and then you have that check each index, and then see if it's
it should work. Yes, if you have, like for example, things like this, and you want to unwrap this level, if you run this inside of a for each, it should work. And then you could also have things like this, like basically depth in all. Like it's almost like multi-dimensional depth, not just one dimension, but it can be in many different spots. If you run a for each across, then it should work too. And maybe that you can play around with that, but it's too much for what we're talking about now. So let's not talk about it.
I get you. It just interests me. It's really interesting, how if your goal is to get to like the deepest level of it, and you're not really worrying about like a type of
So Anthony, a good exercise for you is to print out every DOM element. So be able to take any HTML and then print out all the elements. So you can do that.
I'm gonna try that tonight.
Okay, cool. Are there any other questions? I think the main takeaway for me is that was pretty terrible, and I'll have to think about how to introduce this topic more smoothly. So thanks for being guinea pigs and entertaining my experiments.
Recursion doesn't sound so scary though. When you see it just like that, it's pretty easy to explain, I think, or in an understandable way.
I think it could be a lot better. Adrian, did you watch the for each video and figure it out? Figure out your issue that you had? All right, no response. Okay, anyone else before last question? Okay, well, I guess that's it. So everyone, thanks for joining, and hope to see you next week. Keep on going through your learning and stay focused, and talk to you soon. Thanks for joining. As usual, I'm gonna stop the broadcast and I'll hang out a little bit off air. If anyone wants to chat, give criticism or whatever feedback, I'm all ears. So thanks again for joining. I'll talk to y'all soon.